I watched most of the Kamala Harris interview on Fox News. A lot of people are talking about how badly she performed if you're on the right and how amazing she performed if you're on the left. I am personally more of the opinion that she didn't answer any question at all. She just deflected and went on the attack every single time, mostly attacking Donald Trump. For example, when asked about 80%, almost 79%, I believe, of Americans believe the country is headed in the wrong direction, and asked, you were in power for the last almost 4 years. What do you think about this? And her response was, well, Trump was vying for power, like he was a candidate for the last almost 4 years. It's just, what does that have anything to do with it? He wasn't, setting policy. The policy that makes people unhappy with the administration, 80% almost. It's just she made nonsensical retorts to whatever she was asked, and word salad, deflection, name calling. That was basically 99% of what she said. But I want specifically to talk about a moment where she referenced Trump saying the enemy within. So this is something that you see a lot in social media, where basically they claim Trump is trying to attack half the American population and even promising or threatening to set the military or the army against them. I have a clip here from Forbes demonstrating this.
He has stated that one of the biggest threats America faces is, quote, the enemy from within. The enemy from within. But know where that language harkens back to. Understand, and let us be clear about what he is saying. He considers any American who doesn't support him or bend to his will to be an enemy to our country.
Okay, you've seen enough. What they do is just take clips of him saying the enemy within, maybe one more word, and that's it. There's no context, there's no nothing. They give zero reasons for why or who he is talking about. I thought to compare. For example, Hillary Clinton saying Trump supporters may need to be deprogrammed, right? In the interview on CNN, said that the ex-president is an authoritarian populist. Quote, sadly, so many of those extremists take their marching orders from Donald Trump, who has no credibility left by any measure. End quote. He's only in it for himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members. But something needs to happen. So, obviously, if you don't believe the mainstream media, then you realize that they are using lawfare against not just Trump, but anyone that disagrees with him, with them. Basically, they are the ones who attack anyone who will not take marching orders from them. And they are just, projecting. Projection is basically 100% of what they do. And when Trump talks about, well, look what they're doing to the country, look what they're doing to their political enemies, they are using lawfare, they're weaponizing the state power, the Department of Justice. This can't continue. We have to do something about it. If you listen to actually what he says, that's literally it. He's specifically talking about the high-ranking Democrat politicians. He's not talking about everyday Democrat voters. But I want to prove the point further. This is from Zero Hedge, which is not particularly right-wing, And US military now authorized to end Americans on US soil. Just ahead, intriguingly, of the November elections, the US military has granted itself permission to unleash lethal force on the civilian population in cases of national security emergency. Interesting. So, under the Biden-Harris regime, which, let's be honest, Biden is in cognitive decline, it's the Harris regime, the military just gave itself legal right to and its own citizens on their own home soil. Okay. And this was also talked about by Rand Paul. Incidentally, it's not some loony conspiracy theory. Okay, so what we have here is a case of the Democrats weaponizing the military potentially, and definitely weaponizing the Department of Justice against anyone who disagrees with them, and then blaming it on the Republicans. They are the ones who constantly talk about how Trump is a dictator and he's not going to leave office, even though he was already in office and he left it. You know, despite the fact that he claims, and a lot of people agree with him, basically half the country, that the election was not kosher, let's say, of Biden. Despite the fact that he claims that, and he was never allowed to present his evidence in front of a court. He was denied in every single court from presenting the evidence. Unlike Democrats, who had all the money and time in the world, were allowed to present everything in front of the Senate and the courts, and came up with nothing when they talked about Russia collusion narrative. Despite that, Trump still peacefully transferred power. And if you're talking about January 6th as though he didn't, watch the videos of the people that were literally ushered in by the police. They walked between the Velvet Troops. They didn't do anything violent. They didn't even bring any guns, despite the fact that they are the biggest fans of the Second Amendment, the most armed citizenship on the planet, going to overthrow the government without a single gun. Interesting, killing not a single person, even though one of theirs was, shot and ended with no provocation, essentially, Ashley Babbitt. But they'll go on and on about January 6th as though it's... I heard them compare it to 9/11. It's nonsense. And what they're doing right now is preparing you to accept the need for using, how to put it, very brutish state force against the political dissidents, people on the right, especially if they fortify the election, let's say, and people once again feel as though it was not a kosher election, something wasn't quite right there, and they completely shut you down. You know, social media decides to censor to the levels that it was before or even more. I remember Steven Crowder going and he asked them essentially what the rules were about doubting the elections, and they basically said you can only claim that something wasn't right with the election if you have specific proof that you can show on the camera. So he went to places where people were registered to vote from and showed that either the address didn't exist or it was like a parking lot or stuff like that. And after a while, he continued doing this, so they shadow banned him. I think they banned him completely, demonetized him, and banned him off YouTube for like a week or two. It's just the censors. If this happens again, the fortification, if Kamala Harris wins, they will, in my opinion, my prediction, they will increase the censorship to 11 again, or even more, and they will probably be quite brutal on any physical demonstration, no matter how peaceful, against the certification of the election. You'll probably see very extreme rhetoric on all the news talking about the far right and the danger to democracy that they present, because they won't accept they have doubt about the result of the election, and they might even use the military to ensure that people don't behave, how to put it, in any way that might inconvenience the transfer of power, let's say. They will not allow anyone to question the narrative in any meaningful or public way, no matter how legal or peaceful it is this time around. I think that they have no legitimacy left because, half the American population already has no trust in the elections. I think if they fortify again, they expect quite heavy resistance. In my opinion, they expected heavier resistance the first time. If you remember, they had all sorts of barriers set up around the Capitol, the Capitol building for Biden's inauguration. I think they expected physical resistance. They still got some resistance. I remember the military stationed around basically showing their backs to the president and the ceremony because they weren't happy, obviously. But even so, I think they expected a more robust pushback, and I think they are definitely expecting it this time around. I don't think they will allow anyone to express their doubts at all. And it's funny, it used to be that it was normal for one side or the other when they lose to express doubts in the elections. Democrats did it multiple times. I think Al Gore did it too. Definitely with Trump. It's not something unique to Republicans or something new. It was happening all the time until the 2020 election, when the Democrats suddenly declared that doubting the result of the election isn't, something normal that we have a legal process for, and then we settle it by checking the evidence and figuring out whether it's true or not. Instead, it's something completely out of the blue, unacceptable, taboo, and if you do it, then you are basically excommunicated publicly and banned from everything, depersoned. Well, I think this kind of, how to put it, escalation from the Democrats is very worrying, and it's just, it shouldn't even be possible. How could it be that nobody talks about the Department of Defense granting itself the power to end their own citizens? It's just, read it. It says here, quote, as the US prepares for one of the most controversial and closely watched elections in history, a concerning update to DoD Directive 5240.01 has quietly put into effect. Reissued on September 27, 2024, this directive governs the Department of Defense's intelligence activities and now includes provisions authorizing lethal force in certain circumstances when assisting civilian law enforcement. While the directive forbids assassination, it opens the door to lethal interventions under national security conditions. Okay, it says here that in the 2016 version, the directive primarily focused on intelligence collection and ensuring civil liberties protecting for US persons. However, the 2024 version expands the military's role, particularly in assisting civil law enforcement, and authorizes lethal force under specific conditions. Okay, so what's the conditions? It says here, in accordance with the following approval authorities, Secretary of Defense approval. The Secretary of Defense may approve any type of requested permissible assistance described in paragraph 3.2. The decision to approve requests for these types of permissible assistance described in paragraph 3.2 to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities are reserved to the Secretary of Defense. Assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality, or in any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including ending or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. So essentially, if, for example, they think that civilian law enforcement might be meeting with protests from people who, let's say, don't agree with the how to put it, the honesty of the elections, then they can just approve the use of lethal force against them. That's it. It doesn't say here that the civil law enforcement have to be overwhelmed or in danger of bodily harm or lethal force used against them. It just says that the Secretary of Defense can do it, right? So long as there's a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups reasonably anticipated, he can just do it. Or he or she, they can just... It's insane. It's such an escalation and such a... how to put it? The draining away your civil rights. They're draining the meaning from your constitution, and they are leaving you with no protection from government force whatsoever. And it's fine. They can even blame the other side and say that they are the ones doing it or planning to do it. Justify their own actions with saying, we totally know that the other guys will do it if we don't. Well, they've been in power and they didn't do it back then. They didn't authorize the Department of Defense to end you, basically for any reason. But they will if they get into office, so we need this power to fight them or something. I don't know. They won't even acknowledge that they've done it until enough time has passed and people have been sort of gotten used to it. It's been normalized, at least for their public, right? It's just so frustrating to see. They have an echo chamber, and like half the country is tuned in to it, and they can, in a matter of days, maybe weeks, just normalize anything. So whatever it is that they are being accused of, they'll just say, no, it's normal, it's fine, it's been done before, or it's justified, or whatever excuse they're using at the time. And that will be it. It will pass as though nothing happened with their side. And they don't care about the other side because they criminalize the other side. They use force against the other side. There's no discussion, and there's no longer a social fabric, like a shared social fabric. I always imagined the political game as so you have like a piece of cloth, like a tablecloth or something, and everybody's trying to pull it in their direction. And it's never large enough for everyone to have everything they want. So it's like a push and pull kind of thing, right? And it's basically the tablecloth's torn apart. They don't care about the other people because the people at the other side of the table are no longer capable of exerting force. You tore it, and now you're disconnected from them. You can just do whatever you want. You no longer have to be careful to tear it in case of the consequences, which might be quite dire, like civil unrest. You basically are already prepared for it, and it's already something that you've accepted will happen as a result of your actions. You just want to get as much done before the other side reaches the same conclusion. You've secretly cut the tablecloth, and the other side still hesitant to pull too hard because they are afraid that things will fall apart. But you just go all the way, and you expect that it will eventually result in things falling apart. You don't care. You're prepared for it. You've already demonized them. You've already justified all use of violence on your side prematurely. It's just, that's the way I feel, honestly, with how, not just in the US, mind you, all over the West, essentially. There's been a complete disconnection between the people in power and like half the public. Check France, check the UK. It's just, you can see that they're not even represented in government anymore. Like you have, I don't know, 10-15% of people represented with like 5 seats out of 500 in the UK. It's crazy. And in France, it's the same thing, guys. They used all sorts of elections shenanigans. I'm not saying anything illegal, but definitely against the spirit of the elections to minimize the electoral power that Marine Le Pen's party got. So as a result, people don't have representation, right? You have a much larger percentage of people voting for Le Pen than Le Pen has percentage of seats in government. So they are disconnected from the public on purpose. They want it. They basically can no longer reach any sort of shared understanding or compromise with half the population, and they have no intention of stopping or holding back or slowing down in order to try and reach it. They want to disconnect, go forward full steam ahead, and treat the people who disagree as essentially dissidents in an autocratic regime. And this is the proof. They are already drafting and putting into place the legislation or whatever it is that they need in order to prepare for it. And they say it's the other side doing it. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.